She hid in my home to escape her own kind. Now she's afraid I'll turn her in. The unexpected visitor. The red sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the dunes of Tarsus. Kai Rayner wiped the sweat from his brow as he secured the last bolt on the atmospheric regulator. 6 years on this desert planet, and he still wasn't accustomed to the blistering heat. That should hold, he muttered to himself, an old habit from years of solitude. The transport yard where he'd established his repair business sat 3 kilometers from the nearest settlement, close enough for commerce, distant enough for peace. After 15 years as a military engineer during the Viridian conflicts, peace was what Kai craved most. He gathered his tools and headed back toward his workshop, a converted cargo hauler partially buried in the sand for insulation. The evening wind had picked up, carrying fine particles that stung any exposed skin. Kai pulled his protective scarf higher and quickened his pace. Something wasn't right. The workshop door was slightly ajar, just a centimeter, but enough to notice. Kai never left it open. Sand damage could ruin delicate equipment. He approached cautiously, his hand reaching for the pulse tool at his belt. It wasn't designed as a weapon, but could serve as one if necessary. "Hello," he called, pushing the door open wider. The interior was dim, emergency lights casting blue shadows across his workbenches. "I know someone's here. Show yourself." A slight movement came from behind the coolant tank. Kai raised the pulse tool. "I'm not looking for trouble, but I won't hesitate to defend myself." "Please," came a soft melodic voice with an unmistakable accent. "I mean no harm." Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Kai's grip tightened on the pulse tool. She was Viridian, lavender skin with subtle iridescence, large almond-shaped eyes with violet irises that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her face was marked with exhaustion, a bruise darkening one cheek. "What are you doing here?" Kai demanded, not lowering his tool. Viridians, especially on Tarsus, meant trouble. Their species had conquered numerous worlds, including this one, establishing themselves as the ruling class while subjugating others. "I need help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have nowhere else to go." Kai noticed her clothing, once fine but now torn and dusty. Not the military uniform of Viridian forces, but the distinctive cut worn by their scientific elite. "You're a long way from the spire," he said, referencing the gleaming Viridian headquarters that dominated the settlement's skyline. She pulled back her sleeve, revealing an insignia burned into her lavender skin, the mark of the Viridian High Council's research division. "My name is Nilari Vex. I was chief researcher until 3 days ago, when I refused to continue our work." Her eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and determination, met his. "They're using our own people as test subjects, the lower castes along with humans. I couldn't be part of it anymore. Kai should turn her in. The reward would set him up for years, and harboring a fugitive Viridian would mean execution if discovered. Why come to me? To a human?" "Because," she said softly, "they would never expect one of their researchers to seek refuge with their enemy." Kai lowered the pulse tool slightly. "And what makes you think I won't hand you over right now?" Nilari's shoulders slumped. "I don't. But I've heard stories about this mechanic who treats everyone equally, regardless of species. I hoped—" She swayed slightly, exhaustion evident in every movement. Against his better judgment, Kai secured the door and activated the perimeter sensors. "There's water and ration packs in the cabinet," he said gruffly. "You can stay until morning. Then we'll figure out what to do with you." Relief flooded her features. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Kai replied, still uncertain if he was making a terrible mistake. "This might be the worst decision either of us has ever made." Tentative trust 3 days had passed since Nilari's arrival, and Kai still wasn't sure why he hadn't turned her in. Perhaps it was the haunted look in her eyes when she described the experiments, genetic manipulation designed to create compliant workers from the lower castes. Or maybe it was simple defiance against the Viridian authority he'd fought against for so long. "Hand me the phase calibrator," Kai said, extending his hand from beneath the hover transport he was repairing. Nilari hesitated before selecting a tool. "This one?" "No, the one with the blue handle." He sighed as she passed the correct tool. "For a chief researcher, you don't know much about basic mechanics." "My specialization was biochemistry, not engineering," she replied, a hint of defensiveness in her melodic voice. "Though I'm learning quickly." That much was true. Nilari absorbed information at a remarkable rate, asking insightful questions about his work. In return, she'd helped him improve his water reclamation system using principles he'd never considered. "Why did you become a researcher?" Kai asked, sliding out from beneath the transport. Their conversations had been mostly functional until now, both cautiously circling deeper topics. Nilari's violet eyes grew distant. "I believed I could help my people. The Viridian homeworld is dying. Toxic atmosphere, depleted resources. Our expansion was presented as necessary for survival." She traced the insignia on her arm absently, but somewhere necessity became exploitation. Progress became cruelty. "When did you realize what was happening?" "Gradually, then suddenly," she said softly. "The final project involved neurological alterations to remove resistance to authority. When I saw the test subjects, some were just children, I couldn't continue." Kai nodded, understanding moral lines that couldn't be uncrossed. "I was a military engineer during the expansion wars. Designed weapons, transport systems, defenses. Told myself I was just building things, not using them. What changed? Saw the aftermath of a particularly brutal campaign. Realized everything I built was causing suffering." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Left as soon as my contract ended. Found this place. Not many questions asked on Tarsus if you got skills." The silence between them felt different now, no longer wary, but weighted with shared understanding. That evening, a sandstorm howled outside the workshop. They sat across from each other at Kai's small table, sharing a simple meal of synthesized protein and hydroponic vegetables. "Your people think we're savages," Nilari said suddenly, "but you've shown more compassion than my own kind." "Don't romanticize humans," Kai warned. "We've got our own history of atrocities. Individual decency doesn't redeem an entire species." "Perhaps that's true of both our kinds," she replied. "Perhaps it's individuals who matter most." Later, as Kai prepared a sleeping area for himself near the workshop door, still maintaining his self-appointed guard position, Nilari spoke from her makeshift bed. "I can't stay much longer. My absence will have been noticed." "Where will you go?" Kai asked, surprised by his concern. "There are rumors of a resistance, former scientists, lower caste Viridians, humans working together beyond the western dunes." Kai considered this. "That's hostile territory. Radiation pockets, nomadic raiders. You wouldn't survive the journey alone." "I'm aware of the risks," she said quietly. In the dim emergency lighting, her lavender skin seemed to glow faintly. Kai found himself studying the elegant curve of her neck, the determined set of her jaw. He quickly looked away. "We'll talk about it tomorrow," he said, turning off the main lights. "Get some rest." As darkness enveloped the workshop, Kai stared at the ceiling, wondering when exactly the fugitive had become we in his thoughts. The growing bond 2 weeks later, Kai watched as Nilari confidently dismantled a malfunctioning navigation system. Her slender purple fingers worked with newfound precision, no longer hesitating over the tools. "You're getting good at this," he admitted. She smiled, a gesture that had become less rare in recent days. "I had an adequate teacher. Their routine had developed naturally, mornings spent on repairs in the workshop, afternoons devoted to planning her eventual journey to the resistance, evenings filled with conversations that stretched longer each night. They'd begun sharing stories, Nilari describing the crystal forests of the Viridian homeworld, Kai recounting Earth oceans he'd visited as a child. "There's a client coming tomorrow," Kai said, wiping dust from the console. "You should stay hidden." "Another transport repair?" she asked, closing the navigation panel. "No, moisture evaporator maintenance. Shouldn't take long." He hesitated. "It's Markin." Nilari tensed. Markin was Kai's only friend in the settlement, a former medic with connections everywhere. "Do you trust him?" "With repairs, yes." "With your existence?" Kai shrugged. "Better not to test it." That night the temperature dropped unexpectedly. Kai woke to the sound of coughing. Nilari was shivering on her cot, her lavender skin ashen with a grayish undertone. "What's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "Just the temperature fluctuation," she managed between coughs. "Viridian thermoregulation is different from humans." Kai placed a hand on her forehead, burning hot. "This isn't just cold. You're ill. Our biology, not fully adapted to Tarsus," she whispered. "The atmosphere contains trace elements toxic to Viridians. My protection injections would have worn off by now. Panic rose in Kai's chest. Why didn't you say something? What could you have done? Her violet eyes were glazed with fever. The only treatment is in Viridian medical facilities. Kai made a decision then, one that surprised even himself. Stay awake. I'll be back. He moved quickly through the night, taking hidden paths to the settlement. Markin's dwelling was dark except for one window. Kai tapped the specific rhythm they'd established years ago. The door slid open moments later, Markin's weathered face registering surprise. Kai, I need medical supplies, specifically for Viridian biology. Markin's expression hardened. That's restricted. Black market stuff. Dangerous. Life or death, Kai replied simply. Something in his voice must have convinced his friend. Give me 10 minutes. True to his word, Markin returned with a small case. 2 anti-toxicity injections. Don't ask how I got them. He studied Kai's face. This isn't just about profit, is it? It's complicated. It always is. Markin handed over the case. Be careful, Kai. When Kai returned, Nylari was barely conscious. He administered the injection according to her mumbled instructions, then held her as violent tremors racked her body, the treatment fighting the toxins. Hours later, her fever broke. Exhausted, Kai hadn't left her side, his hand still holding hers. You risked exposure, she whispered, her voice raspy. For me? Yeah, well, he muttered, suddenly self-conscious. Can't have you dying in my workshop. Bad for business. Her smile was weak but genuine. Thank you, Kai. In the dim light, something shifted between them. Kai became acutely aware of their proximity, of her delicate fingers interlaced with his. Without thinking, he reached out, brushing a strand of silvery hair from her face. Nylari's breath caught. Her violet eyes, now clear of fever, met his with a question neither had dared ask aloud. This is unwise, she whispered, even as she leaned toward him. Definitely, Kai agreed, closing the distance between them. Their lips met hesitantly, then with growing certainty. Her skin was smooth against his calloused hands, her touch both alien and familiar. The kiss deepened, years of loneliness dissolving in the warmth between them. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Kai rested his forehead against hers, marveling at the impossibility of it all. A Viridian scientist and a human mechanic, finding connection on this harsh desert world. What happens now? Nylari asked. I don't know, Kai admitted. But whatever comes, we face it together. Hunters and hunted. The warning came at dawn, a coded alert on Kai's communication system from Markin. Viridian officials in settlement, asking questions. Be careful. Kai and Nylari exchanged alarmed glances. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival, 3 weeks of growing closeness and shared purpose. Now reality had caught up with them. They've tracked me here, Nylari said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. We need to leave immediately. Kai was already gathering essentials, water purifiers, ration packs, portable tools. The old mining tunnels extend beyond the settlement perimeter. If we can reach them, we might be able to circle around to the western dunes. They worked efficiently, moving with the synchronization that had developed between them. Within 20 minutes, they had packed survival essentials and erased evidence of Nylari's presence. What about your business? Your life here? Nylari asked as Kai locked the workshop systems. Just a place, he replied simply. The truth was, it had stopped feeling like home the moment he'd decided to help her. Home had become something different now, something defined by presence, not location. They slipped out through a maintenance tunnel Kai had installed years ago as an emergency exit. The morning sun was barely cresting the dunes as they made their way toward the abandoned mine shafts, careful to stay low and avoid leaving tracks. The entrance to the mines was half buried in sand. The warning signs faded by years of exposure. Kai activated a light source as they descended into the cool darkness. These tunnels were carved during the first Tarsus expeditions, he explained, leading the way through the narrow passage. Mostly depleted now, but they stretch for kilometers. They navigated the labyrinthine tunnels for hours, Kai relying on an old miner's map projected from his wrist device. The air grew thinner as they ventured deeper, forcing them to rest periodically. During one such break, Nylari traced the rough wall with her fingers. My people destroyed so much in our expansion, never considering what was already here. Kai took her hand, still marveling at how natural the gesture had become. You're not responsible for your government's actions. But I benefited from them, she replied softly. Complicity through silence. Until you weren't silent anymore, Kai reminded her. That's what matters. A distant sound echoed through the tunnel, the unmistakable whine of Viridian energy weapons powering up. They've found the entrance, Kai whispered, extinguishing their light. They must have tracking technology we didn't account for. Nylari's expression hardened. The insignia, she realized, touching her arm. It's not just a mark, it contains nanoprobes. I should have known. They moved faster now, deeper into the tunnels where collapsed sections and unstable areas might interfere with tracking. The sounds of pursuit grew louder. At a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions, Kai made a decision. Take the right path. It eventually surfaces near the western dunes. Nylari gripped his arm. What about you? I'll create a diversion. His expression brooked no argument. They want you more than they want me. I can buy you time. Kai, no. He silenced her with a kiss, fierce and desperate. Find the resistance. This isn't goodbye. I'll find you. Before she could protest further, he pressed his personal communicator into her hand and disappeared down the left tunnel, deliberately making noise to attract attention. The plan worked too well. Kai had barely traveled 100 meters before being surrounded by Viridian enforcers, their energy weapons trained on him. Where is the fugitive Nylari Vex? Demanded their commander, a tall Viridian with ceremonial facial markings denoting high rank. Never heard of her, Kai replied, forcing a confused expression. I'm just a prospector checking the old mines. The commander nodded to one of his subordinates, who struck Kai with practiced efficiency. Pain exploded across his jaw. Your workshop showed traces of Viridian DNA, the commander continued calmly. Take him for proper interrogation. They dragged Kai back through the tunnels. His mind focused on one thought. Nylari needed time, and he would give it to her, regardless of the cost. The interrogation room in the Viridian Spire was clinically sterile, its white surfaces seeming to absorb all warmth. They questioned him for hours, alternating between threats and offers of immunity. Kai revealed nothing. On the 3rd day, alarms blared throughout the facility. The guard stationed at his door suddenly collapsed, revealing Nylari standing behind him, holding a Viridian stun device. I told you to run, Kai said, his voice rough from shouting during interrogation. And I decided not to listen, she replied, releasing his restraints. The resistance is real. I made contact. But I couldn't leave without you. How did you get in here? She smiled grimly. I designed half the security protocols in this building. She handed him a weapon. Can you walk? Kai stood, ignoring the pain. Lead the way. New horizons. They moved swiftly through the Viridian Spire, Nylari's intimate knowledge of the facility proving invaluable. Emergency protocols she had triggered provided cover as they navigated to the lower levels. The landing bay is 2 levels down, she whispered, as they waited for a security sweep to pass. If we can commandeer a transport, they'll track any official vessel, Kai pointed out. Nylari's violet eyes gleamed with determination. Not if we alter the signature transponder. I know how they're coded. The landing bay was chaotic, with personnel responding to the various false alarms Nylari had initiated. They slipped aboard a small research vessel, securing the doors behind them. Can you pilot this? She asked as Kai examined the controls. It's not that different from the transports I repair, he replied, already activating systems. Work on the transponder while I get us airborne. Minutes later, they shot from the bay, accelerating rapidly into the upper atmosphere. Pursuit was inevitable, but the head start might be enough if Nylari could mask their signature. Where are we going? Kai asked, navigating through turbulence as they left Tarsus's atmosphere. The resistance? Nylari looked up from the transponder panel, her expression resolute. We need to go further. There's a neutral colony in the Lyra system, beyond Viridian jurisdiction. Lyra's 2 weeks of hyperspace travel, Kai noted, checking the fuel systems. This vessel isn't designed for that kind of journey. There's an abandoned shipyard in the outer asteroid belt, she said, used during the early colonization. If we can reach it, we might find something suitable. Kai nodded, plotting the course. Their escape had been improvised, desperate, but now a plan was forming, a future neither had dared imagine weeks ago. They reached the asteroid belt without pursuit, the transponder modification apparently successful. The shipyard was exactly as Nylari had described, a graveyard of vessels from a more hopeful time, when Tarsus had been a promising frontier rather than a contested resource. This one, Kai said after they'd spent days examining the derelict ships. He pointed to a mid-sized vessel partially hidden between larger craft. Civilian explorer class, built for long-range surveys. With some repairs, it could make the Lyra journey. They worked tirelessly, salvaging parts from other ships, Kai's mechanical expertise complemented perfectly by Nilari's scientific knowledge. What one couldn't solve, the other could. They restored life support navigation, and finally the hyperspace drive, transforming the abandoned explorer into a vessel capable of carrying them beyond the reach of Viridian authority. On their final night before departure, they stood in the observation dome, the vastness of space stretching before them. Tarsus was visible as a reddish point of light among countless stars. "I never thought I'd leave it behind," Kai admitted, his arm around Nilari's shoulders. "Do you regret it?" she asked, looking up at him. He considered this. 6 years on Tarsus, building a life of isolation after the horrors of war. It had been a kind of penance, a withdrawal. Now he was choosing something entirely different. "No," he said finally. "Tarsus was where I was hiding, not where I was living." Nilari leaned into him. "The Lyra colonies are said to be true sanctuaries, multiple species coexisting, pooling knowledge rather than conquering." "Sounds idealistic," Kai said skeptically. "Perhaps, but isn't that worth pursuing?" Her voice carried conviction. "What my people did, what your people have done in their history, those weren't the only possible paths. We can choose differently." Kai turned to face her fully, taking in the features that had once seemed so alien and now were beloved. Her lavender skin with its subtle iridescence, the violet eyes that held such intelligence and compassion, the determination that had first led her to reject her government's cruelty, then to risk everything to save him. "Whatever we find in Lyra," he said softly, "we face it together." "Together," she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. The next morning, they completed final preparations for departure. As Kai initiated the launch sequence, Nilari took the co-pilot's seat beside him, her presence no longer surprising but essential. The explorer's engines hummed to life, a sound of possibility rather than escape. As they pulled away from the asteroid belt, the stars seemed to beckon, no longer distant and cold, but full of promise. "Course set for the Lyra system," Kai announced, his hand finding Nilari's between their seats. "Ready for hyperspace?" She nodded, her smile containing the certainty of one who had found her path. "Ready." The stars elongated around them as the ship leaped into hyperspace, carrying them toward a future neither could have imagined alone. Two beings from worlds at war, choosing unity over division, love over hate, possibility over the familiar limitations of the past. Behind them, Tarsus and its conflicts receded. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also hope, the chance to build something new among the stars, something neither human nor Viridian, but uniquely their own.